Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this, welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. That is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya, and welcome to episode 151. And on this week's episode of the podcast, I'm going to be reviewing Brad Pitt's latest film, Formula One the movie, or just F1 or F1 the movie. It's got a bunch of different titles all over the world. It, of course, is the movie about Brad Pitt being a veteran, rejoining a Formula One team. There will be a non-spoiler review as well as a spoiler section of the review, and then I will respond to listeners' answers to question of the week. Let's jump into non-spoilers for F1.
Louis Chiron was 57 years old when he won the Monaco Grand Prix.
Who is who?
Philippe Tancelang, 56 years old.
You just Googled these names, didn't you?
Some people look at Sonny Hayes, they see a guy who lives in a van, a gambling junkie who missed his shot.
Wow, Ruben, you are really selling this.
But I see a guy who makes teams better.
I see experience, I see know-how.
You're off your meds.
My Rook is a phenomenal talent. Phenomenal! But he's young. You know what he lacks? Maturity.
I believe I've stated this on the podcast prior to the release of F1 or Formula One the movie, which is I'm not a fan of the sport. I know over COVID and a lot of the Netflix documentaries that it became a big phenomenon, even more so for people over in North America. It is obviously one of the most international followed sports, and the drivers come from all over the world. And this movie being one of the major blockbusters being produced by Apple TV is a substantial investment. You get the director from Top Gun Maverick, Joseph Kosinski, to bring in that level of immersion into the Formula One scene with cars that are driving absolutely insane speeds. And what's really interesting to see the conversation evolve around this movie is this just a stereotypical sports film in terms of structure and character dynamic? Or is all of this superseded by the fact that the team understood the whole point of making this movie, which was, whether you like it or not, advertising a very growing sport internationally, as well as making this another leading role for Brad Pitt, who is an aging A-lister. You're ignoring that as well as one of the elements of the movie, but also capitalizing on what was such a success with Top Gun Maverick and getting us to feel the same way in the cockpit that you would do in the driver's seat of a Formula One car. And I would say both of those things are kind of valid. Not being a fan of Formula One, when it comes to the rules, I felt very similar to the way that I feel in a sporting film, whether that be boxing or a team sport of any regard, where if the movie is doing its job, you are swept up in the competition. You're invested in the characters and hoping they succeed. Whatever hurdles may quite literally or metaphorically get in their way, you want them to be able to overcome those challenges. And beat by beat, you could definitely tear down this movie for being mostly predictable, familiar with a lot of elements in this, and Top Gun Maverick, which is a film I really enjoy, but it is one of those movies that was able to supersede its predictability because of the level of investment in people returning to the Top Gun world after nearly 40 years. That's a substantial investment in a character and a franchise to then see Tom Cruise return to it. And Joseph Kosinski and everybody involved with that, Christopher McQuarrie, I would be remiss without mentioning his level of connection with that film. And hiring a lot of the talent and the production behind what made Top Gun Maverick work is still present here. Again, the nitty-gritty of the rules of Formula One are not something that I know, nor do I feel like they would affect your level of entertainment in the movie. It's been a long time held belief of my own, and one you can see by following the success of the industry, is that these movies are not successful if you only get people who are familiar or fans of the sport or the franchise that they're marketing. You need to get everyday audiences to want to sit in the theater to watch something for entertainment, whether that be to feel sad, to laugh, or to be thrilled. Those is what I would argue are the three main points of entry for any major film goer. Or I guess technically you could connect thrilled to being wowed, blown away, or maybe with some summer movies coming up, just an air-conditioned building to take your kids for 2 hours. And everybody involved in Formula One, F1, understood the investment, which is we are delivering something that will meet the expectations of audiences, but at the same time, we want to develop and provide that thrill that people felt in Top Gun Maverick. And one of the issues that they face in doing that is you don't have that return on investment of character because you have to do all the legwork of introducing a new character. Everybody in this franchise is new to us. This isn't some weird spin-off off of Days of Thunder, which allegedly is something that might be happening because Christopher McQuarrie was talking about during the marketing for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning that he has an idea for a Days of Thunder sequel. And wouldn't it be cool to see those two worlds merge? And after seeing the film, that may sound preposterous, or before seeing the film, but it kind of does make sense in the aftermath. One of the things that I found particularly interesting, and obviously my goal here with the Film Realist, and if this is your first time listening, hello, welcome to the show, that a movie like this, or typically I'm watching a movie sort of assessing what is the thesis statement of the purpose of this movie and addressing whether it was one of those three things that I mentioned earlier. And the thrill of this works because most of the film is built into that established expectation with sports films. This may be a movie where the sport is people driving in cars, but as was popularized probably most relevantly by the Rocky franchise, the way that I've kind of explained this plot in my head for analysis is it takes the best elements of something like Rocky Balboa and then also a mix of something like Creed, where you have this dynamic of the wily veteran and the rookie. Then this is just the most recent. I'm a diehard fan of the Rocky franchise, but I'm sure there could be some connections to other films within the sporting movie genre to connect those things, and selling this on an A-lister like Brad Pitt when we do have less and less of them. The irony, of course, being Top Gun Maverick was sold with the return of Top Gun, but obviously Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise, one of that illustrious A-listers that you can sell movies around. But that dynamic is really important. And the back and forth between Brad Pitt and, oh my goodness, I lost his name, Dansom Idris, works really well. Unfortunately, his character, I don't think, is given enough focus, which to me is one of the faults of the film, which is it is over 2.5 hours, no, 156 minutes. Yeah, it is over 2 hours long, and some of the way that we decide to focus the overall story, he's compelling because of his back and forth with Brad Pitt, but unfortunately, I would have appreciated to see more of his character on his own to really help settle in what ultimately his arc is as a Formula One driver. The back and forth of the wily veteran and the cocky rookie, again, some of this is going to sound very familiar, and so much of the elements are that, but in a way that is delivered needs to be compelling, and fortunately for the film, there is not a ton of racing movies. Now, obviously, you have comedies like Talladega Nights, Days of Thunder, but it's rare that these films, specifically now, get an opportunity to be a main stage blockbuster. This is the movie of June 27th, 2025. The competition is not nearly as substantial as other weeks. This film did wind up winning the weekend, having an overall gross domestically of $555 million, with a total worldwide box office being somewhere in 150, which is substantial, or around 150. It might be just slightly under. And a movie just aiming for the thrill of entertainment, you need the audience to feel comfortable in what is going to be happening, whether that be in fairly predictable twists or quite literal crashes, to expect the character's recovery and the redemption of them physically and from a character standpoint to work. You need to have those elements baked in. the way that I was discussing this film with friends and family of mine was that this is maybe the most Brad Pitt role of all time. He's settled into being an older actor. What is his exact age right now? That being of 61, although obviously he doesn't look it, but taking a very familiar aesthetic and personality that I would say is very much akin to something like his character of Rusty in the Ocean's 11 franchise. Somebody who is so settled in who they are, but what lies beneath the surface is somebody who's battling with internal trauma and trying to overcome and achieve something that they had been unable to do in their prime. And Brad Pitt does that. He is the leading man of this story. And the back and forth that he has with all of the relationships outside of JP, the other driver, work really well. I think so much of the history between Javier Bardem's character and him is so playful and enjoyable because you feel the history with those two characters. They're people who are from a different era of Formula One coming into the modern era, and that recruitment and an opportunity, the olive branch being laid out by Javier Bardem's character, allows the audience to settle in on feeling comfortable with somebody who you know is quite literally and metaphorically in this stance or in this place, being in his corner. And I liked a lot of that. I think the length of the movie is one of its main issues. There are two major events that I would say really should have been the second act ending. And because this movie is similar to in structure to Top Gun Maverick in some degrees, we have two major events that are supposed to sort of alter the characters' relationships and allow an opportunity for that change or shift. When you get two of those, it makes the middling events between the two of those things sort of drag. We have a major event probably at about the halfway mark of the movie, which would allow an opportunity for those characters to settle in on their new dynamics. But throwing in another one makes I think it does make the film feel unnecessarily padded. I was starting to feel the length of the movie near the last third because of that. And funnily enough, the conclusion of the movie feels like it has about 2 or 3 endings. And matching at where we see Sonny Hayes, Brad Pitt's character, at the end, there is a conclusion to his story that sort of feels as if it undercuts what we've become to learn from him, and the revelation that he provides with Javier Bardem's character seems to just sort of keep going unnecessarily. So I think there's a great ending in the movie, but unfortunately, giving us something that's a little more tongue-in-cheek undercuts it slightly for me. I know some Formula One fans who I saw with this, and it's really interesting to see a sport that is so active and not attempting to make this feel fictional in terms of fake teams and fake drivers. Everybody in this is real, so the level of immersion in terms of the reality of the sport is very much a part of this, whether that be the analysis of the science that goes into creating and manufacturing and engineering these cars is entirely new information to me, and Kerry Condon's character doesn't reach the heights of something like what we got in Top Gun Maverick. That's going to be all of the comparisons. Jennifer Connelly's character in that had a pre-established relationship with Maverick off screen in Top Gun prior to her debut, in quotes, in Top Gun Maverick, where everything in this, as I said at the very beginning, has to be established and new. And the back and forth between Kerry Condon's Kate McKenna, who's the technical director, and her and Brad Pitt, they have great chemistry, but because they need so much to happen in the movie, I wish we really got to spend more time with them, or maybe left a little more to the imagination that there was a potential for a future. Things just, they didn't have time because of what was the shared goal of the Apex Racing team at the time. So overall, is this film perfect? Absolutely not. but I definitely sit in the camp of the goal of this movie is to provide entertainment, wild ride, quite literally watching these people drive these cars in your D-Box seats, or I guess 4DX, if that's what it would be called in the United States, where you're moving around, you feel as if you are in the seats with the drivers, and it achieves that. Predictability, sure, but is that necessarily a bad thing? I would say no, and I can get more into that in spoilers. So let's jump into my F1 the movie spoilers next.
Son is here for the audition.
When was the last time you won a race?
Sunday, Daytona?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Formula One.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then same as you.
So as established in the non-spoilers for this, there's a lot of similarities in the Top Gun Maverick framework, and that shouldn't be surprising because Joseph Kosinski directed this, and I believe it's Aaron Kruger also worked on this as a screenwriter. He also worked on Top Gun Maverick. So the construction of the movie really does match the setup of Top Gun Maverick. And doing the same thing twice, not necessarily a problem, but the tricks that you would use to establish a lot of these relationships and character dynamics and just personalities are quite similar. Difference in this being is we of course know that Maverick had success as a Top Gun pilot and graduate, where Sonny Hayes' character in this is a flame out from Formula One back in the 1990s. He had a horrible accident and resulted in him falling down this path of gambling, and his thrill and need for driving is what is the momentum behind all of his decisions, whether that be doing Indy boxcar races or going to Daytona. He is in it for the thrill of driving. And unbeknownst to him, a friend of his, Javier Bardem, who is Ruben, is in charge of a Formula One team and recruits him because they can't get a driver. And this is his, pun intended, and you'll find out in the movie, Hail Mary, to bring Sonny back to help mentor Joshua Pierce. I believe it's Damson Idris's character. If I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize. To mentor him and help establish how to be a successful racer. And the irony, of course, is that Sonny Hayes, as you would have heard in the clip leading into this, wasn't necessarily a successful racer. And the back and forth, funnily enough, having done a Pixar tier list recently on the podcast, you can check that out on all the socials, is if you took Jackson Storm and made him Lightning McQueen's mentor. I'm using all my car metaphors in this, but instead in Cars 3, it's somebody else. I don't remember the name of that car. Apologies. And, it's Cruz Ramirez. That's what it was. And the back and forth between those two characters, that's the crux of the conflict. There's external factors. If the team fails, Ruben's going to lose control and it's going to wind up being sold to somebody else. But you have the youth whose whole concept of being a Formula One driver is built in with the idea of fame, success, money, notoriety, celebrity. But Sonny Hayes is somebody who loves driving. He eats, dreams, and is fixated on getting this feeling of flying while driving. You're just in the groove. I'm sure there's a bunch of other weird sports metaphors you could use for that. And similarly enough, there are sequences quite literally that are similar to that of Top Gun. But what I appreciate Maverick, what they do with this is they turn them on their head, where the audition, which you heard a clip for, he ultimately crashes in his audition, but still manages to have a successful time. And it's his knowledge of what makes a successful car, and obviously Brad Pitt looking like Brad Pitt, and his charisma is what connects him to Kerry Condon's character and what starts to brew that romance. What I like about the movie, not being a fan of Formula One, is the way that we see Sonny's driving mentality and his tactics compared to Joshua Pierce, and how that dynamic and learning from each other, seeing the significance of teamwork. They are a team. It is not just individual success that will help the team, although points are points in terms of if they place in the top 10 or whatever. But that's a conflict that they do have. And Joshua's perspective on what the point of driving is and really getting to learn from a more grassroots level of training and approach to driving is very similar to that of the Rocky movies, where Sonny Hayes, Brad Pitt's character, he's running, he's doing chin-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, old-fashioned workouts, and he's jogging on the track. He's not using a high-tech treadmill. He does use the sim quite a bit, but understanding exactly what's going to lead to success and the idea that they are going to have to hit the limits of what their car is capable of from a combat standpoint, as opposed to just raw, brutal speed. And it's cool to see what goes into this. Of course, all this stuff is probably happening, but as somebody who is a complete outsider to the sport, I didn't feel as if it was condescending in the delivery. It is quite entertaining to see them try to figure out this problem and how they're going to make the team successful. And I mentioned this in the non-spoilers, and it's a perfect time to bring this up now, which is we have two major accidents. One with Joshua Pierce, which sees him have an accident and he ultimately has to be a different driver. And it is while he is away healing, Sonny Hayes and the third driver who's been brought in are having success based on the way that they redesign the car, which makes enough sense. You have to have that character sitting out, but I think you probably could have made that work in just having Sonny have more success instead of Joshua's accident, or similar to Top Gun Maverick, Sonny has another accident. He had one prior to the film starting, and that causes another hurdle where whether he's going to race again. Personally, I think that one's more important just based on it presents an opportunity for Ruben to reevaluate his past health history and the unlikely nature that his injuries are going to make it so he can no longer drive. And this being Sonny's opportunity for one more race. And ultimately finding a loophole by hiring a Tijuana lawyer and waiving all liability from him, I thought was quite funny and very Sonny. And the back and forth, the way it develops once they're both driving again, and Kerry Condon trying to be the sort of mediator in bringing these two people to work together, and slowly seeing how Sonny's infectious personality and awareness on what makes a driver successful, it supports the team. It makes it where one of the funny things is they're all wearing unmatched socks and going on runs together, and the evolution, and I would say almost the opening up that Pierce has as a human being, not just being strictly a driver, but building actual personal relationships with his pit crew, and how that allows him to see Sonny's perspective and the way that they learn from each other, and ultimately leading to Sonny's victory in the final race. And I've heard from people that they would have preferred Josh win, and I get that, but the way that the film sets it up, where it is Sonny's last race and him ultimately winning and becoming a victor, he quite literally is the best in the world, something you can say if you win Formula One, is a great conclusion for that character. Yes, you could say that it is formulaic and predictable, but ultimately there's only really so many ways to write a sports movie, and I don't necessarily mind the foundation being things we are aware of or expect. If all the other stuff on it makes it entertaining, makes it thrilling, that's the point of these movies like that. Getting swept up in the success and wanting the final win or the championship, the strikeout, the victory, whatever it may be, wanting that for our main character. And the victory of Sonny sort of just leaving while everyone is celebrating, to me, that's a much better conclusion than seeing him go to race again, because the film introduces the idea that his vision might be going, and him winding up in the desert to do almost this dune car racing, that's definitely going to kill him because of the amount of change and the way that your suspension would be reacting to a completely uneven and untreadable terrain. That to me felt like a hat on a hat. We were just trying to be really clever with how we are going to write this character off. Him walking off in a moment of triumph, to me that would have worked substantially better. But overall, again, being somebody who's not a diehard fan of this, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It didn't blow me away, partially some of that has to be due to the fact that Top Gun Maverick puts you in the cockpit of a Raptor and you're flying around in a perception that you may not you would never have, and driving a car, while obviously not at these speeds, is still something that feels relatively closer to achievable than flying in a plane. So I think everybody involved was able to achieve the main goal of this, as can be seen with it being one of the most successful opening weekends worldwide of an original film. And I'm grateful for that, especially because having seen a lot of Apple TV's films, or Apple films, they haven't necessarily been great, but I had a good time with this. Is it something that would absolutely blow most people away? Probably not, but it's very easy to suggest you go see this in theaters. That will do it for my non-spoiler thoughts on F1 or Formula One or F1 the movie. Let's jump into question of the week responses.
Can I ask you a question?
Just fun?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's question of the week I thought was a fun one. It was, what sport deserves a Formula One Top Gun Maverick treatment? We got less answers than I was expecting, but that's all right. Thank you to everybody who wrote in. Jermaine Jones writes in, baseball. They can do way better promoting their sport. Interesting, because I would argue, Jermaine, that baseball probably has the most movies of any of the sports, but interesting. Scotty Cameron writes in, maybe dirt bike racing. I do like me some biking. I struggle to come up with more of a defined answer because those kinds of sports aren't really something I pay attention to. Okay, fair. And then Dylan Pollock writes in, a sport that deserves the F1 treatment, fencing. Fencing was cool during the Olympics, so maybe that. NASCAR, but I understand for the layman, that's basically F1. I actually find that really interesting, Dylan, because I've been talking about NASCAR and obviously the Days of Thunder stuff we've heard more recently. And I think because we are going to be getting that, it'll maybe feel more derivative of F1 by the time we see it. But also, culturally, NASCAR is so different than Formula One. I think those worlds within athletics are so dramatically different that it will feel like an entirely different world than it would feel in Formula One. It's a much more international thing, Formula One is, than NASCAR. My opinion is, and this is probably so predictable and the most Canadiana thing, it would be ice hockey. We've got some super entertaining ice hockey movies, whether that be, I'll throw my American listeners a bone, Miracle, covering the Miracle US Olympic team, the Mighty Ducks films, I believe it's called Winter, Alaska. But there's never been a movie that I think really helps establish the speed and the ferocity within a hockey game when you get, whether that be NHL players or Olympians, at full speed, hitting each other, the speed of the puck being shot, and the way that hockey plays happen so quickly, and the rapid decisions that have to be made. Obviously, I understand they're not moving at the same speeds as motor vehicles, but getting like helmet POV shots from people skating. Look up how fast Connor McDavid skates. It's very, very fast, and how quickly they do things on the ice, which a lot of other sports, when you are playing a team sport, you are using your feet on some sort of terrain in a shoe or a cleat. Adding ice and skates also ups the danger. So my answer for this question of the week would be hockey. Next week's question of the week is connected to next week's review, which will be Jurassic World Rebirth. I'm still not going to get off this rock, which is, it should have been called Jurassic Park Rebirth, but somebody somewhere decided that the Jurassic World name was more important than Jurassic Park, but whatever, what do I know? It's simple and it's fun. What is your favorite dinosaur? To answer the question of the week, you can email the podcast, filmreelistspod@gmail.com. You can comment directly below on Spotify and YouTube. I look forward to your answers. And if you want to send a tweet or a DM, Film Realist is on all the social network platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Hive, Blue Sky, Threads. It's on all of them, and I check them, and I appreciate all of your comments and feedback. They are greatly appreciated. If you haven't yet, follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave a 5-star review, as well as a written one. It will get read on the show. If you haven't yet already listened to my bonus episode non-spoiler thoughts on Ironheart, good news, I will be releasing a full spoiler review Wednesday at midnight, giving all of my thoughts on all 6 episodes, full spoilers. So if you've watched all 6, great opportunity to catch up on non-spoiler and full spoiler thoughts. So make sure you're following the podcast on your favorite platform so you do not miss that episode. Next Monday's podcast, as is connected to the question of the week, will be Jurassic World. So there's 2 episodes this week and then Jurassic World Rebirth next week. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I will see you next time.